right, everyone, I'd like to get started by introducing myself briefly. My name is Sarah Sanford. I'm the Operations Manager at the NCW Tech Alliance. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a mission to bring people and technology resources together to support entrepreneurship, STEM education, and technology adoption across North Central Washington. We host 40 plus programs and events each year. One of our more recent programs being Tech Talks for Nonprofits in partnership with the Nonprofit Practices Institute, or NPI. These are free quarterly webinars that are designed to provide really valuable insights into various technology topics to help streamline your nonprofit workload. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the lovely Claire Oatley to give a little bit of a brief introduction to Nonprofit Practices Institute. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So I just wanted to make sure that all of you on the call are aware of the Nonprofit Practices Institute, or NPI. We partner, the Community Foundation partners with the Icicle Fund to bring affordable and accessible trainings and workshops and different networking and learning opportunities to North Central Washington. So we're really excited to be able to partner with the Tech Alliance on these quarterly Tech Talks. We also have an ongoing on-demand nonprofit board certificate course that anyone in Chelan, Douglas, Okanagan, and Grant County can access for free. So definitely take advantage of that. It's in English and Spanish. Also wanted to let folks know about a couple of things coming up down the line. We've got our strategic consulting grants that will open up on February 1st. And then in March and April, we will be bringing grant writing workshops to North Central Washington, and we'll be kind of all over the region delivering those grant writing workshops. So we've got some exciting things happening down the line, and we hope that you'll join us for some future trainings. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. Well, we are going to dive in and get started with today's topic of cloud file storage and sharing. So our content experts will be discussing and comparing cost, storage, sharing, integration, and access to help streamline your nonprofit practices and workload. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Ron Brown, the Executive Director of Technology, Safety, and Security with the Wenatchee School District, to do a brief introduction and say hello.
Hello, everyone. I am here on behalf of the Google side, but I might be talking about both to start with. So you could hear some biases coming out of me regarding this platform, but just for context, we in the Wenatchee School District have used Google Workspace for going on 15 years. We were one of the early adopters and used Chromebooks, iPads, Windows PCs, Macintosh desktops, and the Google Workspace. We also use Microsoft O365. So we have both products in the school district. And I don't see Martin yet. So Martin is with SimplePowerIT, a longtime Microsoft user, and will hopefully be able to join us here pretty quick because we had a nice, fun competition going. You can't go wrong with either of these, so I think you'll find that by the end of the session. I think your decisions really depend on your nonprofit and how you function as a nonprofit and how you'd like to function as a nonprofit.
And I'm so excited to see that Martin has just joined us. Perfect timing as we dive into round one of today's battle, which is cost. And I might kick it over to you, Ron, to start with Google while Martin gets settled in.
Okay, great. So from the nonprofit lens, and again, I think that our purpose really comes back to that each time we have a conversation about our various topics is what is the cost to a nonprofit? You work on lean budgets and you have to provide value for your organization. So from the Google side, they have several plans from free to paid to versions, and those in the Google Workspace world, which is what it's called, is you receive all the tools within the Google Workspace, and when you pay, you receive some additional services and some additional storage to go along with that consistent tool set. So it starts free for unlimited users, and then all the way up to an enterprise level, which would be for a large organization with a lot of shared space. In between, there's some $3 a month per user and a $5 a month per user. And most of that is for additional storage and additional participants in a product called Meet, which is their online meeting application. Hand it off to you, Martin, for the Microsoft side of the
Nothing
call.
like coming in right in the nick of time. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Perfect timing, Martin.
Us technologists aren't always right on the ball with technology, but we can talk about Google and Microsoft, so that's what we'll stay focused on. So much like Google, Microsoft also has sort of bundled offerings. And I would say that Microsoft puts even more emphasis on the bundle than Google does, where storage, in fact, sometimes it's even hard to find like how much storage is included because they're focused more on the combination of apps that they provide with their different subscriptions. And on the next slide, we'll talk specifically about the storage. But essentially for a nonprofit, the good news is that it's free. And the first 10 users also get the bundled software with, and then some other stuff too. But by the bundled software, I mean the ability to install Office 365 on up to, for 10 users on up to 5 devices per user. A nonprofit can actually have up to 300 free licenses and use all of the web-based services of the Microsoft 365 suite, including storage, which we'll talk about in the next slide, the SharePoint and of course OneDrive.
Perfect. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Martin. I think round one, we both have clear cost advantages with Microsoft and Google. So we've got a tie for round one, taking 1 point each. So we're going to move on to round two now, chatting through storage. And I'm going to hand it over to Ron to chat through Google.
So the way Google Workspace manages their storage in a product called Google Drive is it provides 30 gigabytes per user pooled across the organization. So if you had a 10 user nonprofit, that's going to give you 300 gigabytes of storage across your whole nonprofit. And that's provided in a couple different products. One is called Google Drive, or My Drive, which is your own personal files or shared files. And then the additional piece is called Shared Drive, which is an organization-owned folder or drive of files that is owned by the nonprofit itself and is shared across users within the nonprofit. So the storage amount depends on the number of users.
And you're handing it off to me, I take it at that point.
Hand it off to you.
Okay, perfect. So it wouldn't in some ways, I think we maybe needed a slide 1.5, which is naming, how the products name each other, because Microsoft, I think, has never been an expert necessarily on naming things, and sometimes they cause some confusion with the way they name things. But much like Google has things that are called Drive, Microsoft has named things sometimes confusingly. So they have OneDrive, which is, I always tell people OneDrive is like my documents in the cloud, and it's probably the equivalent of what Ron said is My Drive. And you can also get access to OneDrive if you just have Microsoft's personal account. But if you have the business account, the OneDrive is up to a terabyte per each named user. And that goes away if that person gets deleted from your organization. So if you remove their account, all their storage goes away. Then they also have SharePoint, and SharePoint is a collection of stuff that Microsoft makes available to an organization. In the context of what we care about is there's SharePoint file libraries, which is where you can share organizational data, and as much to the equivalent of Shared Drive in Google. And that is where I encourage all organizations. That's where you want to save stuff that matters, because that lives with the organization, not with the person. And that, as soon as you sign up for Microsoft, you get a terabyte of shared storage in SharePoint. And then you get an additional 10 gigabytes for every named user. So theoretically, you could have 4 terabytes of data if you have a very large nonprofit and take advantage of all 300 free licenses.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Ron. And as we look at round two storage, we decided to give this one to Microsoft for its storage capabilities, flexibility, and scalability. So whether you're a small or a large nonprofit, Microsoft storage options can cater to your needs, ensuring that you never run out of space while keeping your data safe and accessible. So Microsoft takes the crown this round, and with Microsoft in the lead with 2 points, let's move on to round three, sharing. I'm going to hand it over to you, Martin, to chat through Microsoft.
Great. So both products, that's the whole idea of these sharing tools, is that the point is not just have an ecosystem that's inside of your organization. So Microsoft does it. Both OneDrive and SharePoint files can be equivalently shared, and a lot of it is driven by the security policies that the organization has in place. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have some of our nonprofits calling us and say, hey, I can't share, or I put in someone's external email address and it says it doesn't work. And sometimes that's just a function of the way the security is set up. So I want to just kind of put that out there first, that we actually encourage our organizations not to maybe set up anonymous sharing, because it invites people to get access to their organizational data that they may not know have access to, and so it can provide a security opening. So anyhow, that being said, once you have configured your security properly, or the way that which works for your organization, you have, let's assume that you've allowed it for external sharing. Sharing works really great. You can right click on the file from File Explorer. You can click on the file in the web browser, depending on how you're accessing the file, and you can add in, whatever email address you want to share with, and it works just great. The thing that we sometimes see confusion with is that sometimes people who are receiving that sharing invitation, if your security says that it has to be a specific person using that sharing link, they often have to sign in with their Microsoft account in order to get access to that. And we find that occasionally causes confusion because people don't know that they have a Microsoft account, or they don't know which Microsoft account is corresponding with which password they have. And that sometimes that's particularly true with board members of nonprofits, because they may have a personal address they use for their board work, and they may have a work address that they use, and they're already signed into their browser, for instance, with their work address. And then they go try to follow the link and they can't get at it because it was shared with their other email account. So we see things like that cause confusion. They're all things that can be worked through, but it's one things that I often field questions from with our nonprofit organizations. And
so on the Google side, and again, I think I'll talk about both. They both do the internal and external sharing based on your own security settings. There isn't a system setting within either that blocks those. It's really up to you as an organization how to design your own sharing policies. They both offer real-time sharing. And I think one of the strengths of the Google Workspace environment is that it does, even being browser based within any browser or a Chrome device, you can edit and share both Google Workspace files and Microsoft files. So in native format, you can collaborate or share real time with Excel, PowerPoint, and Microsoft Word files, just like you can with Google Workspace files, all within the Drive product and application. Along with, and this is true of both, there's commenting and chatting and change tracking, which is a really powerful feature for nonprofits to make sure you have versionings, to make sure you see the history of who did what to those files. And that is true of most file types within the cloud stored environment for either product. So I think a strength of the Google side is the dual platform, if you will, of editing those Office files in a native format within the Google Workspace environment.
Thank you both. And as we wrap up round 3, this round goes to Google. It's versatility, comprehensive collaboration tools, user friendliness, and cross-platform accessibility give it the edge in the sharing round, making it a great option for nonprofits looking to enhance collaboration and sharing. So 1 point to Google, and now we have a tiebreaker. We're going to move to round 4, integration, and I'm going to hand it back over to you, Ron, to chat through Google.
Yeah. So on the Google side, I mentioned this in the storage component, the product called My Drive. The desktop component is called Google Drive, and the online component that allows for some synchronization with your PCs, with your Macs, but also tight integration if your nonprofit has Chromebooks or Chrome boxes, which are Chrome OS devices, a simple device to manage, but really leverage that Google Workspace effectively, as it is a browser-based product. In addition, there's also extensions and integration, single sign-on options with Google, as there is with Microsoft, as Martin will talk about. I think that make either product very, very, very well aligned with integrating with other things. So I think a differentiator here would be the Chromebook and Chrome OS piece for the Google Workspace, and editing with extensions and other products within the Chrome browser is another extensible piece of the Google Workspace too.
Yeah. And Ron hit the sort of nail on the head. A lot of times we'll have nonprofits approach us and they're struggling with Google, possibly because they're so used to the PC-centric world. And that's their familiarity. So they're familiar with the Office tool set. They're familiar with logging into Windows. The Outlook is what they try to use for mail, and all those things tend to cause a little more friction. It works, but it causes a little more friction for them in working with the Google environment. And so we find that because Microsoft, of course, has Windows as their operating system on a PC, they tend to be Microsoft first. In other words, if you're using other Microsoft products as in a PC with Windows installed, we find a lot where things work really fluidly and well in those environments. So for instance, I'll give you an example. One, a lot of our nonprofits we work with, not only do we help them set up the shared files, but we take advantage of Microsoft's what they call Azure Active Directory, which is an identity management system. And so we set the PCs to log in with their Microsoft 365 account. And as soon as they've done that, they're able to open a tool like OneDrive on their computer and immediately be signed in and be syncing files without having to have a separate sign-in. And so, and they have security around that identity, so that it works out really well. And similarly, Microsoft is baked into like the Office platform, for instance, Word and Excel, where you can save and open directly from either your OneDrive or your SharePoint location. So again, that works really well. Office now or Outlook, if you get an email, it'll or you attach an email, it says, hey, do you want to actually attach the email, or do you just want to send a link to it so that people can collaborate on it? So it does a lot of things to try to encourage people to use the collaborative features of the Microsoft 365 platform and actually take the decision, making out away from the users. In fact, I tried when I see users, if I look over their shoulder and I see them attaching an email onto a file, I'm like, why are you attaching that? You can just show the link so you guys can collaborate it in real time. And then, of course, Microsoft also provides other tools where you can sync to those files to iPads, Android devices, et cetera, but they're definitely a Windows first environment with their integration.
Great insights. Thank you both. This round goes to both Microsoft and Google. We agreed this really depends on your nonprofit's specific needs, platform preferences, and existing software environments. In this never-ending tiebreaker, both contenders keep hitting us with impressive serves. So let's move into our fifth and final round to see who takes the trophy. Round 5, we're going to look at access, and we're going to kick it off with Microsoft. So over to you, Martin.
All right. So again, here, Microsoft has built access to their storage solutions with the Windows platform in mind first. And one thing I didn't do a very good job of explaining, I think, in the integration slide that I want to touch on a little bit here, and this goes back to Microsoft not doing a great job of naming, but it's a perfect opportunity to me sort of elaborate on this. So Microsoft has, we talked before, it has 2 products for storage, SharePoint and the document libraries inside of SharePoint, and then OneDrive. But confusingly, Microsoft also has a software product called OneDrive. And the software product of OneDrive is actually the tool that is pre-baked into Windows 10 and Windows 11, which is Microsoft's tool for syncing your files to your machine. So long as you open it up and sign in, or if you're using an Office 365 account already on the machine, OneDrive is probably already signed in, it will automatically sync those files to your machine. And then if you go look in File Explorer, like I'm sure most of you have seen, you see a OneDrive and then your name in there, or your OneDrive and your organization name. And those are all your files that have been synced to your machine. Doesn't mean they're all on your machine. It just means that you have access to them directly through the conventional method that most people are used to who use Windows PCs, where they open File Explorer and they see My Documents, and then you see OneDrive, and then you see a list of your files. And a lot of times then it shows you the status of whether the file actually has been already downloaded to your machine, or if it has a little cloud next to it, it means it's available to you. And when you first click it, it'll open it up and download it. So Microsoft does a great job of integrating it, of course, into the Windows platform using OneDrive. And then web, you just can open it directly. And then again, there's a bunch of other tools that they provide if you want to access things on the mobile platform. You can download OneDrive and SharePoint for any of your mobile devices, and you can edit things directly in the mobile versions or in the browser versions of the Microsoft environment. Ron, what about Google?
I think similarly on the Google Workspace side, you've heard this several times. It really comes down to what is your comfort level over your organization. What device types do you have? On the Google side, it works on all platforms. And ubiquitous access on mobile, whether that be a tablet or a phone device with native apps for the editing, along with the browser versions within Mac OS, Chrome OS, or Windows OS. I think as Martin alluded to and mentioned, Microsoft built Microsoft products with Windows in mind first, and Google built Google products with Google OS or Chrome OS in mind first. So if you have Chromebooks, it's a natural partner. And then the Mac OS kind of sits in the middle. If you use Macintosh devices, it can do both equally well, and you're signing into either when you sign in and when you synchronize. Our organization actually uses both. We use Mac OS devices, and my personal device has OneDrive and My Drive, and they both synchronize. So it just depends on the comfort level, the support, the expertise, and the available staff you have within your nonprofit. But I think either product, as you'll see on the next slide, is pretty well accessible on any platform.
And what do you say, Ron? The thing I've noticed is like both vendors design them first with their OSs in mind, and then over the years they become much more aware of, to make it a really strong product, is to provide plugins or whatnot to the other platforms to try to make it more platform agnostic, if you will. But sometimes those are a little further out of reach for the casual end user because they don't understand what they might need to make it work well for them, whether it's Google in the Windows environment or vice versa. And I think that's sometimes where they need just a little help from a tech person to show them how to do it and make it so it's not as just onerous as they think it might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. And, it wasn't less than 2 years ago that the Office products were natively editable in the Google Workspace.
Yeah.
It had some editing features, but it wasn't quite feature rich enough to say it was dual platform. So, and those things come later, as you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you both. So it looks like we have another draw. In terms of access, both offer robust and flexible access options. So really the choice between them depends on individual user requirements and the specific devices and platforms used within your nonprofit organization. So in this friendly battle, I think the real winner is us, the nonprofits. The choice between Microsoft and Google really depends on your organization's unique style and needs and how you prefer to work. So I'm going to put together a quick summary, and then I'll pass it back over to Martin and Ron. So Microsoft provides a suite of productivity tools that seamlessly integrate into your nonprofit's workflow, making it a great choice for nonprofits looking for a structured and familiar workspace to manage their projects and resources effectively. While Google provides simplicity and accessibility, offering a wide range of online and offline access options, ensuring that your nonprofit team can collaborate effortlessly, whether they're in the office or out in the field. So passing it over to you both, would love to hear your thoughts in summary.
I'm looking at the Q&A, and there's a question from one of the that I'm gonna hit, and
let's dive in.
we can both speak to that, and I think it fits the ending of this, which is, someone would like to hear the recommendation, best practices for management in the nonprofit sector to support these with various board members, various expertise, receiving guidance on how to structure, how to maintain these, how to organize things, et cetera. And I don't know if there's a right there. That's not yes is the answer. I don't think there is. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think either product allow you the flexibility to survey your board, understand where they're coming from, what they're used to in their own organizations, and that maybe gets you started. With them both being free, I think either is a viable option. But I will say, once you do start down the road of one of the other platforms, I believe from an organizational standpoint, it's going to be a simpler support lift to continue down that road and leverage that as potentially your main product. And you might use the other off and on. I think there's companies in town. Martin is with SimplePowerIT. There's other support companies in town that offer support to nonprofits that can help. I think there's some consulting services that don't cost very much, and Martin and I are both very willing, as you'll see from the last slide that we talk about, to provide some guidance to nonprofits. Nonprofits are unique organizations that are philanthropic, and I think there's people out there that will help those philanthropic organizations without giant costs. But that is a very well articulated question around support, because you will have to have something, whether it's internally or external support, supporting your platforms and those decisions that you make.
Yeah, I'm going to sort of answer that too, but indirectly, as more of a tie into the summary that Sarah gave, which is the platform. What I find with nonprofits when we support them is a lot of times we see a mix of tools inside of the organization, because different people come and go through the organization, and someone brings in a tool because they're most familiar with it. So someone may be like, hey, I really know Dropbox well. Let's introduce that for file sharing. Then someone's like, hey, Google worked great for us. I came from the education sector and blah, blah, blah. And so and what happens over time is it becomes a mishmash of products, which can be more costly to manage because there's no single consistent platform across the organization. So I think it is a very strategic decision that needs to be made. And typically it's something that's, I think, a better decision for the staff and the executive director to make than the board, because they're the ones who have to use the tools. The board just gets to come along for the ride, and the board is a little more transient in nature, I would say. And I typically encourage the organization to look at things like what's the makeup of your team, as in, do you tend to have younger people who maybe grew up using the Gmail platform and they might be already more adept and comfortable in the Google environment? Or do you tend to have people who are more PC centric and really like the Outlook, Word, Office environment, in which case you might be better off, tending more towards Office. But Ron and I, before this discussion, when we were preparing for this, we're like, hey, you can use both because they're free. And I was like, oh my gosh, don't give that advice. But the reality is you can use both. But I think you need to make a conscientious decision as to why you're doing that and what tool you're using for each part of your business. So I would strongly discourage you from sharing some files in Google Drive and other files in SharePoint, because that'll get you in trouble. I think more important is like, what's your strategy? And then if you don't know how to use that tool, go get help to use it the right way, and then you're off and running. You don't need a lot of ongoing technical support with either of these tools, I think, once you get pointed down the right direction.
I would 100% agree with that last statement. It's up to those staffs to decide what ecosystem were we going to live in, what is going to be our standard product, and then move down that road, and that will be there will be less support than you think needed, especially if you're using the web versions of either product. Quite honestly, the web versions are very, very well put together and straightforward. So I saw Martin's going to answer the next question we got from a user around Dropbox, and I have my opinions of Dropbox. I want to see if he answers it. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if we agree on this or not, because I touched on a little bit with when I said, well, if someone knows Dropbox, so they bring it to the organization. My experience over the years is we've tried to move every single organization that we've worked with away from Dropbox to one of the two other platforms, because in my opinion, not that there's anything wrong with Dropbox, but it doesn't have all the other integrations that Google Drive and Microsoft 365 platform have. So it limits you into just sharing. Whereas you get so much more bang for your buck, your free buck, as it happens with Google and Microsoft 365, if you just commit to one of those platforms and move your files. What we most often find is just an inertia factor. Oh, we've used Dropbox for all these years. That's where our history is. And I'm like, in like 2 or 3 hours, we can get you set up and have those files moved. Not hard. You just have to be committed to it. The thing where Dropbox excels occasionally is people know whether they have a Dropbox account or they don't. And so a lot of times it's easy for board members who are collaborating with a nonprofit to very much compartmentalize and say, oh, I can go get my boards and stuff in this Dropbox because I know I have a Dropbox account that's shared with me. That's the only place where occasionally we see less confusion, but it doesn't make it the right choice for the organization. So I am not a huge fan of Dropbox for nonprofits.
100% agree with everything Martin just said from my perspective. And again, we have users in our organization that use Dropbox, but it's definitely not something I'd standardize on from the perspective of a nonprofit getting the best tools for their nonprofit. I'm going to answer the next one because it's someone asking about Chromebooks. Somebody asking about, what would we recommend? You can tell which side of the fence we're each on. I think we both use both products, but I did mention Chromebooks a few times. Chromebooks they're a unique device built by Google or by other platforms created by Google. The operating system is Chrome OS. It looks like Google Chrome browser in a device. Drop dead easy to manage, and if it's similar in nature to you log into your device, you're logged into all the Google Workspace ecosystem. There is no other login. There isn't anything else you have to do. They are mostly inexpensive, but you can buy expensive ones. If a nonprofit asked me today, what is the lowest cost entry point into a solution that would require the least support to get going, and the least support over time, and we don't have giant files like videos and need video editing or photo editing, I would point them to Chromebooks and the Google Workspace in a second. We use them with kindergartners. They are that easy to use, and we hand them to kindergartners and they sign into them and they use the Google Workspace tools. And I don't think I could do that with a Windows PC and the Office products as simply. But they are just a brand or a type of device. You can find them at Costco and Best Buy and wherever else you find Windows PCs and Mac.
Right. And are you referring to the question that Jan asked?
Yep.
Sorry for calling out by name there, Jan, but about the Chromes in there, right? And then Jan also asked about just having an all volunteer board and how to structure technology. And that is a tougher one. I got to admit, it is a tougher one because what I find in those situations is, like any all volunteer board, is someone has to take accountability. If you really want to leverage technology, one person has to take the lead and make the decision for the organization and then do like a train the trainer type thing. Because I think as much as people want to collaboratively make those decisions, I find then that's where we get in the case where Dropbox, Google Drive, and Microsoft are all being used and no one knows where anything is, unfortunately. I would encourage you to go with one of the tools and then use it in the web, just use the web version of those tools. So you're not introducing your personal device into the mix at all. You don't have to worry about security on your personal device. Just use because both products work really well as a web-only product, and that will be easier to hand off to other future volunteer board members. But it works better than it is trying to have people use their personal accounts in situations like that. So if you're an all-volunteer organization, my recommendation is to go with one of those platforms and try to get your domain set up with that organization. Try to find just enough dollars to give some help setting that up if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself. And then again, I think you'll be off and running. You don't need a lot of guidance, just enough to get you off and running with those platforms.
And I would only add to that, I would encourage any staff of a nonprofit to scaffold those tools for the board. So what I mean by that is build a site internally that is clickable and has links on it to the board documents. So I don't have to go find things in a folder. I can just go to a web page and I can click on a link and it opens up our minutes. It opens up our agenda. It opens up what we need to focus on, because all that is possible with both platforms, and building those links so that only the person with their credentials gets to see those things, but then it scaffolds that information for the board members so they're not having to remember where those files are located. I think that's all the Q&A that I saw in there. Someone asked about some Windows 11 training. Not sure if that fits perfectly here. Maybe
I'm answering him privately. I'm just sending you a note, Matt. So yeah, and then you can call me separately, Matt, if you want. Well, I know Matt from other interfaces. So yeah.
Well, if there aren't any more questions coming in, I will wrap this up today. I just want to say a big thank you to our two content experts, Ron and Martin, for sharing your insight and knowledge with all of us today. It's been invaluable. And a big thank you to everybody who attended today, our second Tech Talk for Nonprofits. It was wonderful to have you. And I do want to remind you that I will be sending out today's presentation, so a recap email with a link as well to our poll to hear your feedback and suggestions on future topics that work for you or that you want to hear about. And I also will share both Ron and Martin's contact information. So if there are any follow-up questions that you have, you can get in touch with both Ron and Martin, or Claire and myself as well. So I'll wrap up today, but a big thank you to everyone for joining us, and we'll see you at the next Tech Talk for Nonprofits.